Welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name's George Istid. This is a Contessa 32. You're watching Refit and Sail, and in this episode we're going to be bringing the electrical system on this Contessa 32 up to a much more modern standard. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the electrical system on this 32. It's pretty much standard as it came out of the factory about 40 years ago now. So there is some modernisation required just in terms of the cabling is pretty bad, and things have moved on a long way. The owner wants more capacity. The owner doesn't necessarily want to add a ton of weight. So we're going to be doing what is, to be honest with you, pretty common these days, and we're going to be installing some lithium batteries. Well, actually a lithium battery. The plan was originally to put two in, but we're going to be fitting a single battery in this. This has got 150 amperes of usable capacity. That is going to triple the capacity, or the usable capacity, that this boat has at the moment, which is going to give him absolutely loads of capacity to play with. And we're also going to be updating the engine start battery, updating all the wiring, and putting in a system that allows him to use this boat the way he wants to use it going forward. But before we do that, let me show you what the standard arrangement looks like as per kind of 1980 or 1979, whenever this boat was built, because it pretty much hasn't been touched since then. I've come down below now. You can see there is the chart table. Electrical panel has been upgraded at some point. That's not original. But tucked down here is the original battery tray. You can see that glass fibre moulding, and it has two batteries in it. So a larger one, which is the domestic battery, and a slightly smaller one, which is an engine start battery. Both are flooded lead acid batteries. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but things have kind of moved on a little bit. It has a 1-2 both switch, or 1-2 both and off switch there, probably original. Again, nothing specifically wrong with that, as long as you understand how to use it and what it's doing in terms of controlling where power goes into and out of batteries when you're running your engine or running things. So we're going to be doing something with that to improve it. It's a bit grot down there. I think it's going to get a coat of paint, maybe just to tidy it up a bit, and we'll take it from there. On other boats where I have done a upgrade in terms of the battery capacity on the boat, I've mostly been fitting AGMs and multiple AGMs, which has necessitated pulling out the original battery compartment and building a completely new battery compartment. But what we decided to do on this boat is retain this original tray, because the lithium batteries are so energy dense compared to lead acid batteries. We don't need multiple batteries to get the capacity that we need. We did originally think about having two slightly smaller lithiums, but this particular battery came up as a bit of a special offer available. It comes with 150 amp hours of capacity, which is pretty much what we were aiming for anyway, sort of 150-ish, 170-ish usable. So given that that's going to triple the amount of capacity that the boat has currently got, we think that's absolutely plenty. So what's also good is that brand new battery that's currently outside is going to slot straight into this existing tray, and we're going to be replacing the engine start battery at the same time. Now, I had hoped and planned to buy a AGM starter battery that was going to slot in alongside the lithium battery, but as with all good plans, they sometimes don't quite come to fruition, because the battery I actually want to buy I can't get hold of because it's out of stock for a couple of months, and this boat is leaving me in about 2 weeks to go back to Scotland. So we have a plan B, which is to still fit a Odyssey dedicated AGM starter battery, but I'm going to build a small box for it to fit alongside the new lithium battery down here. The new lithium battery is going to fit in here. It's going to come to about there because it's a bit longer, but it also will need some means of securing it. At the moment, these batteries are just kind of loose to move around, which is less than ideal. We don't need the sandpaper in there. All this cabling is pretty nasty. That cable there in particular, there's a negative cable to go between the two batteries. That looks like there isn't a lot left of the cable actually kind of in the battery clamp, which is less than ideal. There's lots of other cabling here that kind of needs tidying up. The plan is to put a piece of plywood in. I'm going to bond a piece of plywood alongside this battery box here, and then I'm going to build onto the side of that piece of plywood here just a little box. It's kind of just going to sit here, maybe slightly out of shot for what you can see, and I'll be able to slot the new starter battery in there, and then we can get on to thinking about wiring it all up and sticking all this old cable in the bin. Now, I've already had a look at some of the wiring down here and ripped out some old stuff that just wasn't connected to anything, but I think the best place to start is to get these old batteries out, work out what cabling that is here I need to keep, what I can cut out and remove, and from there we have a fairly decent starting point. What I forgot to mention as part of this is we're also going to be fitting a Victron battery monitor so that the owner can see what is going on with his batteries. Now the new battery does have some battery monitoring capability built into it. It's got some sort of Bluetooth app on it, which is not a bad thing to have, so to some extent he can monitor what's going on with the battery on his phone, but what that app won't do is won't show him the overall amps going in and out of the battery and be able to monitor it and the engine start battery, because whatever the app is that connects to this lithium battery won't know what else is going on in the system. So even if you do have the ability to dial into your battery, it is worth having a battery monitor which shows what's going on in terms of the overall system. Well, that is all the old cabling all stripped out. You may have noticed that all this old cabling, well, for a start, they didn't use red and black, they used black and black with bits of red tape just to indicate what was positive and negative. You will have also noticed there were no fuses whatsoever on any of these batteries. That's just the way it was done back in the 70s and 80s. I will be reinstalling with fuses. That's kind of important. My parents actually had a fire on their boat quite a number of years ago because none of their batteries were fused, and the positive supply to the engine, which was run round the back of the engine, slowly chafed away over 20 odd years on the engine bearers, and halfway across Lyme Bay, you'll know that if you're local around the Solent area, they suddenly have massive amounts of smoke pouring out of their engine bay and had an electrical fire. So I know firsthand from my folks how important it is to fuse your batteries properly. So this will be getting fuses, this will be getting a new battery switch as well, but before I do anything, I've got everything out, but before I do anything, I've removed a lot of cabling. Now, I can make an educated guess on what all this stuff is for, but nothing is labelled, and so before I go any further, I'm going to quickly check where all these cables run to and then label them so that I can refit them where they need to go. And then I'm going to go off to the workshop and start making the plywood piece that's going to go in here to house the starter battery, but also to give me some real estate, if you like, on which I can mount things like the battery monitor shunt and other bits and pieces that will need to go in here. Right, I'm going to do some investigative work on all this lot to see what it's all for. Well folks, as you can see, I'm in the workshop here and I have just been cutting up some bits of plywood. This is my box for the starter battery. That is going to basically get attached to this piece of plywood here, and this is going to get glued and bonded to the side of the existing battery box. So this is just marine ply, it's nothing particularly special about it, and I will glue it together with some epoxy and screw it together, as you can see, and then we can take this back to the boat, offer it up. Hopefully by then the battery that's going to go in here will be delivered, so I can quickly double check that it does fit, and the dimensions I've been told it has are indeed correct. As it'd be very annoying to fit this all and then find the battery doesn't fit, and then this can be bonded to the side of the battery box. So I think that's going to work out quite nicely. I've done loads of these little things, so it's a pretty quick, tried and tested process for making a small battery box for a starter battery. And there we go, one battery. Well folks, we are back on the boat and I have my little battery box doodad here. I've been up the quarter berth off camera doing a lot of sanding because all that locker's just going to get painted because it was all a bit grotty and horrible. So that's just been wiped out, hoovered out, sanded and abraded. I've had this in. I need to do a little trim. You can see I just took the corner off it there. I don't know if you can see that. And I had to take a little corner off here as well just to get it to fit in up against the hull without interfering with anything. It fits really nicely now. So the next job, having done a little bit of grinding, is I'm going to bond this to the side of the battery box, and then I'm going to lay up some glass between here and the hull. I'm going to do that initial bond between the plywood and the GRP existing battery box with Refit, which is this stuff. It is a polyester bonding paste. I'm then going to be laying up some glass in here, as I said earlier. I'm going to be doing that with epoxy rather than polyester. Why am I going to be doing that? It's because it's what I've got in the van. Polyester's around in the workshop, and frankly it really doesn't matter too much. It's a lovely warm day, so it's going to be really easy to lay this up with some epoxy, and epoxy does work particularly well with plywood, arguably better than polyester. There's my Refit bonding paste, and just scooped a bit out. I'm not using a mixing board. I'm going to mix it straight on the plywood that is going to be bonded in. I can't see any reason why not to. Plus it saves me a trip to the van to go and get my mixing pad or onion board. So I'm going to give this a good squeeze of the hardener. It's probably a bit too much, so this is going to go off moderately rapidly. So I'll give this all a good mix and then spread it around. Let me go and get a better mixing spreader. If you're interested in bonding, glassing and all that sort of stuff, I'm not really going to show it in this particular episode because I've covered it in many episodes. In fact, I did a deep dive on kind of bonding and preparing wood and hulls and what have you for glassing plywood into hulls. So if you're interested in a deep dive on how to do that, check out my other videos. I'll try and remember to put a link in on the screen as I'm talking now to that particular video. And there we go, that's it in position. This Refit bonding paste will cure, but what I'm now going to do is mix up a bit of epoxy, thicken it just to make a thickened epoxy mix, and just put a bead of thickened epoxy around the inside of this join here, and then I'm going to lay up some glass and epoxy over the top of that just to bond this really nice and securely into the boat. Oh yeah, you may have noticed that there's a lot less cables in here again than when I filmed earlier. I decided to remove the cables that were all kind of coming out of the holes here because they were only going to get in the way for painting and what have you. So I pulled them all out, and then I've drilled a couple of slightly larger holes just to make it easier to run all the cables that I know I'm going to be wanting to run through from the electrical panel up here back into the battery box. Well, I could have put the camera up for that. That would have been more sensible, but I'm not a professional YouTubist. I just do this whilst I am working. If you do enjoy these videos, you can give me a thank you. There's a PayPal link in the description down there in the bottom underneath the screen. There's a description and a PayPal link where people sometimes buy me a beer to say thank you. Sometimes they buy me 2 or 3 beers, which is very much appreciated. If you don't want to do that, just give me a thumbs up. That thing there. It takes less than a second, doesn't cost you anything. Give me a thumbs up. It shows YouTube that you like my videos, and it really helps grow my channel, and I really genuinely do appreciate it when people give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button as well. Right, I'm going to mix up some epoxy. Well folks, a few days have passed, and through the magic of editing you will see that I have now finished what's going on underneath my bottom here. It's all been painted out in the locker and it is all ready to accept all the new goodies that we're going to be fitting on this boat. So I thought this would be a good time just to talk about lithium batteries, what their requirements are for fitting them, and some of the other goodies that we're going to be putting in. So first of all, the battery. I think I've already shown you this, but I can't remember because it was a few days ago. Here is, and the fact that I can lift it up with one hand shows you how light these things are. Here is the battery that we're going to be installing. This is the domestic lithium battery, or lithium iron phosphate, so LiFePO4 to use its full correct chemical terminology. This is a Sterling Power battery, so it's got Sterling written all over it. I have been running Sterling lithium batteries on my own boat for quite a few years now. I'm going to say 4 years at least, maybe 5. So I lived basically off-grid for a year on my boat at anchor, living off solar and wind power and lithium batteries from Sterling Power, and found them to be very, very good. This is a newer version of their batteries. It has some sort of Bluetooth technology built into it, so you can do a degree of monitoring on the battery itself. Haven't actually played with that, and I'm not too worried about that because we're fitting a proper battery monitor. We are also going to be fitting another favourite of mine. I fitted on many of these boats as a starter battery. Here is an Odyssey Extreme AGM starter battery, so that's going to be going into that little hole, that little kind of wooden container, if you like, that I built, that is on the side of the main battery holder. So the important thing about these batteries, and they're sometimes called drop-in replacement lithium batteries, is they're not completely drop-in replacements. You do have to think about how they are charged. This has been talked about a huge amount on the internet, I'm sure, and if you're watching this, it's possibly likely, very likely in fact, that you have watched other videos on installing lithium batteries into boats. So I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but essentially you cannot charge them directly off your alternator on your engine, because your alternator will almost certainly overheat, because they're standard automotive alternators that are fitted to most marine diesel engines. And the quickest and easiest and the cheapest way to safely charge your lithium batteries off your alternator is actually to charge it off another battery using a battery to battery charger, or a DC to DC charger. We are going to be installing, I say we, me, a Sterling B2B like this. So again, I've been running one of these on my boat, but it was the earlier generation one. This is a new and improved Sterling B2B. It looks a bit like this. So this is a 40 amp B2B. It will simply wire in between this thing and the starter battery I just showed you a minute ago. And what happens is when the engine starts, the engine alternator will be charging directly into the starter battery. This thing senses the voltage on the starter battery. When the voltage gets up to a certain level that this thing knows that the starter battery is reasonably well charged, this artificially pulls down the voltage on that starter battery so the alternator works harder. That additional power that the alternator makes simply gets squirted via this box into the lithium battery. And the reason we use this is it's current limiting, because these lithium batteries have a very low internal resistance. So if they're plugged straight into an alternator, they will make that alternator run at maximum capacity, and most alternators can't actually do that because they overheat unless they're spinning very, very fast, because it needs enough cooling air to pull through it. But boat diesel engines generally run pretty slowly. Sometimes people will charge their batteries just at the engine at tick over, which is not a great idea. But this thing, because it can only pull 40 amps, that's well below what the alternator can deliver. So it is a nice, safe amperage to get the alternator to work at. Now, the rule of thumb is typically that you want to have your alternator working no harder than, say, 50%-ish. That's a very, very safe, conservative number. So if you have an 80 amp alternator, running it at 40 amps is no sweat at all. I have got I think a 70 amp alternator on my Volvo engine, and I've been running a 30 amp B2B, which is very, very, very conservative. I've had no issues whatsoever. So so this thing is going to simply get bolted onto the side there, 2 wires to the house bank, the domestic bank, the lithium one, 2 wires to the starter bank, and it is as simple as that. I don't think there's much more to it. You can put temperature sensors on these things, you can put remote controls on them and what have you. We're not putting the remote control on it. You do need to program it for the type of battery that you're going to be charging, and yeah, it should just work. So what's nice about these new Saturn series, I think they call it, is it also does reverse charging. So if you have a whole bunch of solar charging your lithium bank and you're spending long periods at anchor, for example, your engine battery might just dip down a little bit because it's not being used, especially if you have some sort of parasitic load on it. But if you've got tons of solar and your lithium bank is fully charged, this thing will reverse feed charging current back to your starter battery, which is something that I wish I had on my boat when I was off cruising for a period of time. So this boat is getting solar, so it might well be that that feature gets used on this thing. Right, so what else are we going to be installing? You cannot charge lithium batteries off a standard battery charger, certainly not a car charger, which I know some people have tried. We are going to be fitting a Victron Blue Smart charger. I've fitted loads of these. So this thing's moderately waterproof. I think it's IP22, so it's splash proof. Super simple. This boat does not have a full shore power system, so it's got a 3-pin plug on it. So when the owner wants to plug the boat in, he is literally going to plug that into a socket, and this is going to charge up his lithiums. It is a single output charger. There's no point in getting multiple outlets because battery chargers can only charge one chemistry of battery at any one time. So this will get set to lithium. It will be charging the lithium, but of course, because we have the reverse charging function of the B2B, once this is charged, this thing will actually then charge the AGM starter battery. So all very smart. See, we do think about these things before installing them. Right, what else do we have? We've got some more goodies. Battery monitor. So this is a simple BMV 712 smart battery monitor. It has Bluetooth on it. I've got exactly this one on my own boat. I've installed more than I care to remember of these. It's simple, it just goes in, it runs off a shunt. The shunt is in the negative feed. It's the first thing that the house bank is connected to, and it will tell you exactly what is going in, going out, monitor your usage, and gives you a very, very good, accurate, real-time capacity of what you've got in your battery bank and how long it's going to last. There's lots of functionality in this I don't use typically, but it's a very good, well-proven, very common battery monitor. I've also got some other bits to install. I mentioned I've got some solar to install, so we are also going to have to fit a solar charge controller. So this is going to be wired into the lithium bank again, and it will be set to its lithium setting because it has specific charging requirements. I think the solar panel is around 60 watts. It's not super powerful, but it's going to be enough to give the boat a bit of a charge, because it isn't going to be living in a marina. It is going to be living on a buoy, I believe, when it eventually goes back up to Scotland. So that has got to go in. And I've got a gas alarm. I might not bother covering that in this video, but that's got to go in. One important thing is a battery switch. So I pulled out the old 1-2 both switch, and I'm going to be fitting this chap here, Blue Sea Systems battery switch, and it is a simple on off, but it's a dual circuit on off. So it will switch the house bank on, and it will switch the engine circuit on at the same time when you do that. Keeps them independent, but it switches everything on with one turn. It also has an additional functionality, which is you can go one step further and go on to the combined setting. So in the very unlikely event that the engine starter battery goes flat, can't start the engine for whatever reason, you can just click it around one more and combine the batteries, and it means we'll be able to start the engine off the domestic battery here, and this is suitably rated to start the engine. Now, you shouldn't mix battery chemistries, and this is technically going to mix those chemistries. We've got an AGM and we've got a lithium. Realistically, we shouldn't really be doing that. We definitely shouldn't be doing it long term, but I know from my own experience, if you need to start your engine, combining your batteries for like 20 seconds to start your engine and then uncombining them doesn't seem to do any harm at all. There will potentially be a bit of an inrush of current between the two batteries, but it seems to cope absolutely fine. But the important thing is not to leave them combined. This is a very much a temporary measure. Ideally, you would have all the batteries of the same chemistry if you're using this function. We aren't in this case, but I know it works, and it shouldn't cause a problem for very, very short-term use. And there will be a big sticker underneath saying emergency use only on the combine, only use it for engine starting, and then switch it immediately back to just the on position. Right, that is most of what I've got to install. The way I go about these things is I generally work out where the big items are going to go. Obviously the batteries are going to go where the batteries are going to go. The switch needs to go somewhere sensible. I like to put it slightly out of the way so that it's obvious to see, but hopefully won't get too wet from water coming down the hatch. I'm going to be mounting this just sort of under the seat down here. I'm going to drill a big hole, poke it through that hole so you just see the front. The back on these things is open, and that typically wouldn't be a problem if this was like in a cabinet. If this was kind of mounted up here or something like that, wouldn't be a problem, but it's going to be backing onto a locker where things are going to be kept. So what I'm going to do is just make a little square backer that goes on here. So when this mounts up, there's going to be a backer on there, so you'll just have the cables kind of coming out the sides. What I tend to do is I put all the big items in that need to go where they need to go, kind of thing. I then work out where other bits are going to go, like the shunt for the battery monitor here. If you haven't seen a shunt, let me show you what that looks like. This thing has what's called a smart shunt. So it's very clever. I'm joking, really. So here is the shunt. All the loads will go through this chap here. There we go. This is the Victron shunt. So this will get mounted, connected up to the battery. And once I've got everything mounted, I can then start making up cables and working out what else I need. There's one important thing that I don't yet have because my supplier didn't have the appropriate size, but I need to go and buy some fuses because unlike when this boat was built, I'm going to be installing some actual battery fuses, which is very, very important, just in case a cable chafes through somewhere, somehow down the line. We want to protect the wiring. So I'm going to be installing fuses for the batteries. I'm going to be installing fuses for anything coming from the battery and running any distance, for example, the B2B, and of course, solar charger, and of course the battery charger. Everything needs to be fused to protect the wiring. In fact, even the cabling that goes from the batteries up to the main switch wasn't fused on this boat, so we're going to be putting in a little fuse block, which I have bought here. Again, it's a Blue Sea fuse block, and it's just like a 4-way blade fuse holder, so that all the wiring is appropriately protected. That is absolutely critical. So that's enough talking. I've had 14 minutes of talking here, which is far too long. I'm going to drill some holes and work out where some stuff goes. Now, it's really, really difficult to show you what I'm doing and film down here. So I think it's just going to be a case of I'm going to have to mount some stuff. I'm going to show you what I've done. I'm going to mount some more stuff, and I'm showing you what I'm going to have to do, but I'll do my best. Perfect. Hello folks, I'm breaking into this video which is going to go live hopefully later today if I can get it all edited in time. I'm also taking a quick break from fitting this shiny new deck gear on this Contessa because I've taken a phone call from Sterling Power. They're the guys that have supplied the lithium battery and the B2B for the install on this boat in this video, and they have offered a very special discount code for viewers of Refit and Sales. So you can get 10% off all batteries, so all AMPS amps batteries bought from the Sterling Power shop. And I'll put a link in the description and on the screen now. You can get a 10% discount by using the discount code Refit and Sale 10. Refit and Sale 10 gives you a 10% discount on batteries. However, they have also offered a 20% discount on all their other products. So that is B2Bs, that is plain chargers, that is solar panels. There's a whole range of stuff on their website that is worth looking at. If you would like to have a 20% discount on all those products, put in Refit and Sale 20 at checkout and you will get 20% off all those products. Now, if you're ordering both batteries and a B2B and a charger, you need to put in both codes and the appropriate discount will be applied to the products that you are buying. So thank you very much, Sterling Power. I hope that is useful to the Refit and Sale viewers. I quite like their products. I've fitted them on a number of boats. I've used them on my own boats over a number of years. They've proven to be pretty good, and actually for the money I think they're very good value for what they offer. So thanks very much to Sterling. I hope that's useful to you, the viewers, and well, back on with the show and back on with doing deck gear. As I explained earlier, it's very difficult to get a camera angle in this space here, so you're looking at me from up the quarter berth, and down here I have fitted 2 fuse holders. So I've just installed the positive fuse holders here, so worked out what orientation I want the batteries in. So we're going to have a positive terminal here going straight onto that one, and we've got a positive terminal here going straight onto that one, and then this is going to go off to the switch, which is over here. So I'm going to make up some battery cables and get this all fitted. Well folks, that is the first bit of cabling in. You can see domestic bank onto the fuse, and that goes onto the switch, which is just out of shot. Same with the engine battery, to the engine battery fuse and onto the switch. In a minute off camera, because I've got to move the camera, I'm going to run a cable from the switch here round to the engine, which is kind of through there, and then I'm going to be doing some negative stuff. So I need to fit the shunt and a bus bar, and what I like to do when doing an install like this is physically separate the positive stuff from the negative stuff, which is why I've got the fuses here. And my plan is the shunt to probably stick the shunt in there in that sort of orientation, or maybe there, I haven't totally decided. And then I've got a bus bar as well, which is going to go on to there. Well, there you go, folks. As you can see, things have moved on a bit since I last recorded. So I've done the battery cables, both positive and negative have all been run. So this is the positive cable here, connected into the switch, connected into the starter motor. On the negative side, I have run that as well. It is out of shot because it kind of runs around the back here, hidden underneath this tray, and it pops out down there and comes up onto the negative bus. The only other negative cable that is very obviously missing now is the one from the starter battery. So I was just deciding whether I pop that down there and onto the negative bus or pop it over the side and around. But we are most definitely getting there. Oh, don't forget, because this is YouTube, like and subscribe. If you like my stuff, do hit that like button, the thumbs up button. It really does help grow my channel. It shows that you like my stuff, and I really appreciate it. And likewise, hit the subscribe button as well. Again, really helps grow the channel. Costs you nothing, takes less than a second. Well, folks, I've got as far as I can with all the battery cabling. It's pretty much all done, to be honest with you. I haven't yet connected up the electrical switchboard here down to the batteries, but that's just a matter of rerunning the cables that were there before. But what I think it's time to do is do something about charging these lithium batteries with the B2B and also with the 240 volt Victron charger. Now, I've got to be honest, fitting these things is super simple. So I had a quick discussion with the owner about where best to fit these items. They need to be in an area where there's a degree of ventilation, but also want to be somewhere where they're not going to get wet. And so you're looking at me looking forward out of the quarter berth, and the plan is to mount them up here. So this is the engine box in here. The batteries are kind of below my stomach, if you can imagine that. And so the plan is to fit the B2B maybe there and the charger right here, so it can have plenty of air. And what I can also do quite easily is I can drill a hole through into the engine box, and I can run the cables down and they'll join the other cables that I've got running through the engine bay down to the batteries. So it is simply a couple of positives and a couple of negatives going between the engine start battery and the lithium battery. All needs to be fused, of course, to protect the wiring, and then it's pretty much done. There are a few settings you can additionally set on this, which I don't need to use. So if it was in a vehicle, you might, for example, not necessarily want it to start on voltage. You might want it to start on movement, and there's a thing called a vibration sensor in there, so it can feel when a vehicle's moving and it vibrating slightly, and that will switch it on. But we're simply going to do it on its standard setting, which is it will voltage sense off the starter battery, and as soon as it looks like the starter battery is being charged, this thing fires up and it will start charging the domestic bank, as long as the voltages are appropriate on the engine start battery. Right, so I'm going to drill some holes and run some cables. model of B2B. It's a 1240, so it is a 40 amp version. So I'm going to be using a cable with a cross-sectional area of 10 mil. That is good for 70 amps, so it's well within range. It's going a very short distance as well, so we don't really need to worry about voltage drop at all. So I'm just going to run these cables down. I'm going to drill a hole or two here, probably just one larger hole would make more sense, and then I can poke all the cables through and bring them down through the engine bay and back into the battery box. I don't want to just run them down here because potentially someone is going to be sleeping in here. Not many people sleep in quarter berth on a Contessa because it's a bit narrow and a bit difficult to get into, but it is a berth, so we don't want cables flapping around in here. So far better to run it into the engine bay, down, and then back through the holes that are already down there for running cables. Well folks, it's the next day now, and I haven't recorded all the gubbins that has been going on here, but the install is basically done. So what I'm going to do now is scroll the camera down and show you how it all looks. Hopefully as part of this I can also explain how it all works as well. So we're going down, 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 and we can see battery, cables, fuses and all sorts. So here's our lithium ion battery into a fuse. Here's our starter battery into a fuse. Here are a whole bunch of more fuses. So this one and this one are for the battery to battery charger, which is mounted out of shot. I'll show you that in a minute, but essentially this is the input fuse and this is the output fuse for the B2B. The negatives all go to the negative bus bar that is here next to the shunt for the battery monitor. This third fuse here is for the 240 volt input, which also goes onto this block here for the lithium battery charger. Now this thing, as I mentioned probably last time, but I can't remember what I said, there's no 240 volt charger that directly attaches to the starter battery, but we don't need one because there are two things that are going to be charging this. One is the engine. When you start the engine, this is going to get immediately charged by the engine alternator, and secondly, when we're on 240, this thing is going to be charged. Once that gets to a full charge status, the B2B will work in reverse and it will put some charge back into the starter battery. So that is all covered. Other bits and bobs that I've put in are just out of shot. There's a little fuse box up here. So just here, attached very close because the main battery switch is just out of shot through this hole effectively, but this just has blade fuses in it so that I can connect up all the things that are effectively directly connected to the battery, or get directly connected to the master switch, because nothing is directly connected to the battery. And that keeps everything nice and safe. So if we scroll up, and you'll see my face briefly, but if we go over here, you will see there is my Victron Energy smart charger. It's currently in bulk charge. It is putting out its full 20 amps into the lithium battery, because lithium batteries are always supplied only partially charged. The safest way to store them long term is at about 50% charge. Next to that is the Sterling Power B2B, and if I press the button here, you can see a light comes on and it is set for lithium. And that really couldn't be an easier install because it is just the four cables here that come out. I've poked them through this engine box so they run down inside the engine case, a whole with a whole bunch of other cables that run down and come out into the battery compartment. If we come over to the main switch panel here, you can see the battery monitor installed. So it's got 19.4 amps currently going into the lithium battery according to this, which is correct. Well, it's 20 amp charger, but you know, 20 amps give or take. And if we flick through, that's 257 watts. Ignore the fact that it says 100% because it needs to synchronize to get to 100 once it's fully charged. So the battery voltage on the main domestic bank is 13.25 and the engine battery is 12.6, because that will at some point need a charge and get a charge via the B2B. Now, unfortunately, the one thing that I can't test and I can't show you is the batteries charging off the B to B with the engine running, because the boat is, you probably isn't obvious on the camera, the boat's out of the water and I can't run the engine. So I'm just going to have to wait and test that when it goes in the water, which is next week sometime. I've got a whole bunch of other electrical gubbins I've got to install. I've just installed a new switch panel, but that is not the subject of this video. But I just wanted to give a flavour of how you can go about fitting a lithium battery in a slightly older boat. It's not a terribly difficult job. It is a job that requires a little bit of thought, and as part of this particular job I've done a whole load of rewiring just to throw in the bin all the nearly 50-year-old wiring and put in all new stuff with fuses and everything like that which weren't there previously, so it's safe and it's future-proof going forward, and the owner can be confident that everything that is in his battery box connected to the engine and connected to the main switch panel is all new, it's all good, and he doesn't need to worry about that going into the future. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a fun one to do. I quite like doing electrical stuff. It's a nice, clean, easy job. It's logical as well. Not everyone likes electrical stuff. It isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I certainly quite enjoy it, and I like making things all nice and neat and tidy. I've got a bit more tidying up to do in here and clipping cables together and what have you, but I won't bore you with that. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to support the show, don't forget, do give me a thumbs up or subscribe down the bottom, ideally both. And if you want to be a super awesome viewer, then you are welcome to buy me a beer. There's a link down in the description. It's a PayPal link. You can send me £5, $10, 15 yen, 20 euros, a million escudos. I really don't mind what it is, but for those of you that do support the show financially, I really do genuinely thank you very much. It's very much appreciated, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.